Jos Verstappen hasn't been quite accepting of the current form of Verstappen and Red Bull, and the father of the three-time world champion has decided to speak up about the issues that his son has gone through with the Austrian team. After being winless for 5 straight venues and now in big danger of losing more points in the Drivers' Championship to Norris, Jos's words might reveal more about the plans and the future of his son, who has also been quite critique-oriented towards the team and the car. With this in mind, has the downfall of Red Bull started yet? And if so, what does the future hold for both the team and Verstappen? It's safe to say that Red Bull has entered a very poor period of performance in which the team has literally no idea what type of upgrades they can mount on the car that would work wonders with the RB20, and that is now showing in Verstappen's performance as well. The Dutchman failed to win a race in the last 5 events, and there are only 70 points difference between him and Norris in the Drivers' Championship, which, considering the fact that there are 9 races left and 3 sprint venues, and how big of a step McLaren made with the MCL 38, might not be too far-fetched of a scenario for a miracle to happen. Jos Verstappen has been the first one to urge Red Bull to do something because, according to him, this was a scenario that his son was able to predict a long time ago, but nobody listened to him when it mattered the most, so nobody really expected Red Bull to start struggling so soon. Furthermore, Jos said, "Maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'm doing it anyway. The fact that you have to go back to the car from the beginning of this year says enough. Red Bull just don't have it right here at the moment. I think they should take a good look in the mirror. Max knew this was coming, he just didn't have a chance. This way, it's going to be really tough for the rest of the year. Max is doing everything he can, but doesn't have the material to finish it. It was already exceptional that he qualified second." There is no doubt that Jos Verstappen is primarily talking about Horner, because we know on what ground these two are standing right now. Jos cannot really accept the fact that Horner is still leading the team after all the accusations and everything that is happening in the background. But nevertheless, the team agreed that everything will be squashed behind the curtains as they have a greater goal ahead of them: fix the car and win both of the championships. While the drivers' one seemed like a secure one, it's now evident that Red Bull would have to give Max everything they can in order to make sure that he won't have trouble finishing P2 or P3, because P1 will be possible on just a couple of races on the grid remaining, considering the struggles that the car has on venues like Singapore and potentially Baku with the latest curb issue. Max Verstappen has also spoken in this regard, and while admitting earlier in the season that there's nothing much he can do at this stage rather than accept that there's no more performance coming from the car and he has to work with what he's got, the 3-time world champion was quite vocal about the recent situation in Red Bull ahead of Monza, as he said, "I think this weekend was just a bad weekend in general, we need to understand that. But in the last few races already, they haven't really been fantastic. So that, I think in a sense, was already a bit alarming. But we know that we don't need to panic. We're just trying to improve the situation, and that is what we're working on. But F1 is very complicated. I don't know if the balance is the main problem to solve in Monza. I mean, we just need to figure out our balance issues, and I think that will also help a lot with the tire deck. In Monza, a lot is new: tarmac, curbs, even the layout in turn 1 and 2. So also that is something we need to understand a bit more, and we know that we have quite a bit of work to do." Definitely, this doesn't bode well for the future of Verstappen in Red Bull, and judging by Horner's latest comments on Lawson and the fact that he isn't promised a seat anywhere due to the greater problems that they have in the team, we can now understand that there is a great issue that needs to be fixed in Red Bull so they can be back on track and back to where they started the season. But the fact that they mounted a flaw from Bahrain on Verstappen's car and a different one on Perez so that they could compare the performances and ran the cars with a different setup is just too big of a reminder of Mercedes' old days when they were experimenting with everything they could in order to find a perfect balance of the car, which they never did. This is something that Helmut Marko has elaborated on after Zandvoort, and when talking about the championship in both categories, the veteran Austrian was adamant that there is a lot of competitiveness that should be expected from McLaren, and that they have been overtaken in the sense of pure performance. Furthermore, Marko said, "We could not keep with McLaren's pace at all. At the beginning the pace was equivalent, but then the tires started to wear and you could see how easily Lando overtook us. And when Lando drives 1.13.8 on the very last lap without DRS, it shows that McLaren was clearly superior here. We also have to remember that Perez's last stint was faster than Max's. They were driving with different setups. Maybe it wasn't the right choice that we gave Max more downforce because we weren't fast enough in terms of top speed and it didn't help us in the corners." The big problem was the tire wear. Verstappen started sliding and couldn't push anymore, but in the end, of course, he controlled the gap to the back. Up front, he had no chance. We're clearly being beaten, so that is alarming. I do think it was partly down to the track, though. It was also about the relatively low temperature. And it was interesting that after the pit stop, Piastri drove about the same pace as Lando and nothing worked when he was stuck behind Leclerc. Unfortunately, that was not the case with Lando when he overtook Max. If you're in Max's shoes, you would definitely look at other options right now because the statement from his father can never be a good thing. We're talking about a man who has literally started a war against the team principle of Red Bull, and therefore you shouldn't be surprised if this war reignites yet again. The difference now is that the internal power struggle is seemingly gone in Horner's favor and he has more power in the team than what he had before, so Jos's statements might fall to deaf ears as the entire focus from the engineers is to make the RB20 great again, not to focus on such chit-chatter from Jos. But if they're unable to do so, and judging by the latest comments from Perez and Marko, they definitely aren't, we might not receive a competitive car for Verstappen because the veteran Austrians said they have upgrades in the pipeline, but throughout the entire summer break, Red Bull did nothing but brainstorm ideas, while McLaren brought a significant package that threatens the entire grid to witness repetitive 1-2 finishes in the last 9 venues. Horner, however, believes that the step that teams like McLaren and Mercedes have made is significantly larger than the backstep that Red Bull made in the past couple of races, and elaborating further on this, the team principle of Red Bull said, "I think it's more where we have the others found performance. I think the front wing is a key area where others have found some performance. The way the front wings are being used are quite different. If you look at the front wing angle of McLaren and Mercedes, they are very different compared to the rest of the grid." The ego of Pierre Wache, as well as the engineers working below him now, suggests that the departure of Newey did have a great impact on where the team moved with developing their car, similar to what happened with Aston Martin and the arrival of Dan Fallows as their technical director. But the situation in Red Bull has much larger proportions that could see Verstappen leave in the foreseeable future. Teams like Mercedes and Aston Martin will be more than happy that the situation is developing in this direction, and with all this in mind, do you think that Jos's statement is a rightful one, and more importantly, do you think that Red Bull have definitely lost their way with developing the RB20 in a proper direction? Let us know in the comments below.